I married a beggar cowboyto, ruined my mother's plans, but he owned half of city. Clara had always lived a life that looked perfect from the outside. Her family was rich, her house was big and sparkling, and she always had the finest clothes and jewelry. People in her town admired her family and often whispered about their wealth and influence. But Clara knew that appearances could be deceiving. Inside the walls of her luxurious home, she felt trapped. Her mother, Mrs. Hargrove, was a woman of strong opinions and high expectations. She had planned every detail of Clara's life before Clara could even imagine it herself. From the dresses she wore to the people she associated with, nothing was left to chance. And now her mother had her sights set on Clara's marriage. Mrs. Hargrove had chosen a young man from another wealthy family in the city. His name was Edward, and to everyone else he seemed perfect. Tall, handsome, and polite, Edward was the kind of man people dreamed of marrying into. But Clara couldn't bring herself to care about any of that. She didn't want a life dictated by someone else's plans, no matter how charming the man might be. The thought of marrying Edward made her stomach twist in discomfort, and she knew that if she went along with her mother's wishes, she would lose herself completely. Clara had always been clever, though. She understood the power of appearances, gossip, and social expectations. She realized that in order to resist her mother's plan, she needed a bold idea, something so surprising that it would throw her mother off completely. It wasn't just about defiance. It was about protecting her independence, her future, and her happiness. But what could she do that was daring enough? The answer came in the most unexpected way. One late afternoon, Clara decided to escape her suffocating home for a while. She rode her bicycle to the edge of town, where the small fair was taking place. Children ran around with painted faces, vendors called out their prices, and the smell of popcorn and roasted nuts filled the air. Clara loved fairs because they reminded her of freedom, of being a child again, before responsibilities and expectations became heavy. As she wandered between the stalls, Clara noticed a man sitting on a wooden bench near the old Ferris wheel. He wore a dusty cowboy hat that shaded his eyes and a worn-out coat that had clearly seen better days. His boots were scuffed, and his hands were rough and calloused. People passed by him without a second glance, whispering things like, "He looks poor," or "Why is he even here?" Clara felt a strange curiosity. Something about him didn't fit the usual picture of someone defeated by life. There was a quiet strength in the way he sat, a calmness that seemed to come from knowing something others didn't. Clara approached him cautiously. "Hello," she said. The man looked up and smiled, revealing a kind but tired face. "Hi there," he replied. His voice was deep but gentle, with a hint of humor in it. "What's your name?" Clara asked. "Daniel," he said simply. "And yours?" "Clara," she replied, studying him carefully. She didn't want to reveal too much yet, but something about Daniel made her feel at ease. Most people she met were either impressed or intimidated by her wealth, but Daniel treated her like any other person without judgment. They talked for a while, sharing small stories about the fair, their favorite foods, and little childhood memories. Clara learned that Daniel had grown up on the outskirts of the city and had learned to take care of himself from a young age. He had worked in ranches, helped neighbors with repairs, and never expected anyone to give him anything for free. He spoke with a sense of independence that Clara found refreshing. She realized that this was exactly the kind of person she had been missing in her life, someone real, unpretentious, and grounded. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara felt a sudden rush of excitement. A bold idea struck her, one so daring that it made her heart pound with both fear and thrill. If she married Daniel, her mother's perfect plans would be ruined instantly. The wealthy young man her mother had chosen would be left out, society would gossip endlessly, and Clara would finally have control over her own life. It was reckless, yes, but it was also brilliant. Clara knew this was dangerous. Daniel appeared to be poor, a beggar cowboy in the eyes of her social circle. Her friends would mock her, her mother would be furious, and society would whisper endlessly. But that was exactly the point. Clara wanted freedom, not approval. She wanted a life she chose for herself, and she was willing to risk scandal to get it. Over the next few days, Clara found reasons to see Daniel more often. She made excuses to meet him at the fair, then at the stables, and eventually at a small cafe at the edge of town. Every encounter strengthened her plan and her feelings. She began to admire Daniel not just for his strength and independence, but also for his kindness, his honesty, and the quiet way he seemed to care about people without needing recognition. He was unlike anyone Clara had ever met, and she realized that part of her plan might also be the beginning of something genuine, a real connection that had nothing to do with wealth or status. Clara's mother, meanwhile, had no idea what her daughter was planning. She continued to arrange meetings, send invitations, and pressure Clara to meet Edward. Mrs. Hargrove assumed that her daughter would comply, as she always had, and she didn't suspect that Clara was plotting something completely different. The thought of defying her mother gave Clara a thrill she hadn't felt in years. For once, she was the one in control. One evening, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Clara found herself sitting next to Daniel on a quiet hill overlooking the city. The town below twinkled like 1,000 tiny lights, and Clara felt a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in a long time. She looked at Daniel and realized that she had to make her move soon. Hesitation would only give her mother more time to interfere. "Daniel," she said softly, "what would you think if we got married?" Daniel looked at her surprised, then smiled faintly. "I'd think you're bold," he replied. "Very bold." Clara laughed nervously. "Bold is one word for it, crazy is another. But yes, I think it might be the only way to stop my mother from deciding my life for me." Daniel studied her for a moment. "And you really want this?" he asked, his voice calm but serious. "Not because of me, not because of what people will think, but because it's what you truly want," Clara nodded. "Yes, I've spent too long living the life someone else wants for me. This is my choice." Daniel leaned back, looking at the stars and then back at her. "All right," he said finally. "If this is what you want, then I'm with you." That moment marked the beginning of Clara's rebellion, her first real step toward independence. She didn't know how society would react or what challenges lay ahead, but for the first time in her life, she felt free. The plan was risky, scandalous even, but it was hers, and it was real. Over the next few days, Clara carefully began preparing her announcement. She avoided her mother's watchful eyes while arranging meetings and paperwork with Daniel. She felt a mix of excitement and fear, knowing that once the news broke, there would be no turning back. But Clara had made up her mind. She would marry Daniel, not just to shock her mother, but to prove to herself that she could take control of her own life. Even though Daniel appeared to be poor and unremarkable to others, Clara had begun to see his true value. His strength, intelligence, and quiet dignity made her realize that wealth was not the measure of a person's worth. And though the world would likely see her actions as reckless, Clara knew that this was more than rebellion. It was the beginning of a life she had chosen for herself, a life of courage, love, and unexpected possibilities. As Clara lay awake that night, thinking about the upcoming days, she felt a thrill unlike any she had known before. The future was uncertain, her mother would be furious, and society would gossip endlessly, but none of that mattered. For the first time, Clara felt that she was no longer a prisoner of expectations. She was free, and she was ready to step into a future she could truly call her own. And somewhere deep down, she also wondered what secrets Daniel might be hiding. There was a strength in him, a quiet confidence that suggested he was not as ordinary as he seemed. But Clara decided that she would discover that truth in time. For now, the most important thing was her choice, her freedom, and the beginning of a plan that would change everything. The day Clara decided to act on her plan arrived sooner than she had expected. She woke early, her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. Every detail of the day seemed larger than life. The sunlight streaming through her curtains, the distant sound of carriages and voices from the street below, even the smell of breakfast cooking in the kitchen seemed heightened. Today, she would step forward and take control of her life. Today, she would make a choice that could shock the entire town. Daniel was waiting for her at the small cafe where they had met so often in recent weeks. He looked as calm as ever, but Clara could sense a quiet excitement in him too. He wore his usual worn boots and dusty hat, but there was a spark in his eyes that told her he understood the importance of this day. Clara had told him only what was necessary. She needed him to be part of the plan, but she hadn't revealed all the ways this marriage would challenge her mother. That part, she decided, would unfold naturally. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked, his voice steady but gentle. Clara took a deep breath. "Yes," she said, "let's do this." The two of them rode quietly to her family's estate. Clara felt the familiar weight of expectations pressing down on her, but this time she refused to let it intimidate her. She had a plan, and she had Daniel by her side. The idea of her mother's reaction made her pulse quicken with anticipation. As they entered the grand hall, Clara's mother, Mrs. Hargrove, was arranging flowers in the massive crystal vase at the center of the room. She looked up, her eyes bright and calculating. "Clara, you're early, and who is this?" she asked, fixing Daniel with a sharp glance. "This is Daniel," Clara said simply. She felt a thrill as she spoke the words. "And I want to marry him, Mrs." Hargrove's face went pale, and for a moment she could not speak. Then with a sharp inhale she said, "Marry him? Clara, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I will marry Daniel," Clara repeated firmly. "I've made my choice, and I will not marry Edward or anyone else that you choose for me." The room fell silent. The maid froze mid-step, and the sound of the clock ticking on the wall seemed louder than usual. Clara's mother put a hand to her chest, struggling to maintain composure. "But he's a beggar, Clara, a poor cowboy. How could you possibly—" "Appearances can be deceiving," Clara interrupted gently but firmly. "And I am not willing to live a life chosen by someone else. I am choosing my own path." For several tense minutes, Mrs. Hargrove could only stare. Her carefully built plans, her dreams of social prestige and influence were crumbling in an instant. Clara, watching her mother's shock, felt a mix of exhilaration and nervousness. The first step was done. The plan was in motion. In the weeks that followed, the town was abuzz with gossip. Clara and Daniel's sudden engagement became the talk of every dinner party, every cafe, and every street corner. Friends whispered about the daring young woman who had defied her wealthy mother, and neighbors speculated about the mysterious cowboy who had captured her heart. Society was shocked, but Clara felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She was finally living life on her own terms. Despite the scandal, Clara found herself growing closer to Daniel every day. She had initially seen him as a tool to challenge her mother, a way to assert her independence, but now she began to see his true worth. He was intelligent, resourceful, and surprisingly wise. He listened to her, encouraged her, and treated her as an equal, unlike most people she had met in her wealthy social circles. She found herself admiring him more with every conversation, every shared laugh, every quiet moment they spent together. Daniel, for his part, was patient and understanding. He knew he was stepping into a world that had little respect for him, a world that measured worth by wealth and family name rather than character and courage. Yet he did not falter. He met every whisper, every disapproving glance, and every question with calm dignity. Clara began to realize that his strength was not in physical power or possessions, but in the quiet confidence and self-respect he carried. One evening, Clara and Daniel walked through the gardens of her family estate. The roses were in bloom, and the soft glow of lanterns lit their path. Clara hesitated, then took Daniel's hand. "I have to admit something," she said. "When I first met you, I only saw you as a way to shock my mother. I never imagined this." She gestured between them, meaning the growing bond, the respect, and the feelings that had taken root. Daniel smiled softly. "I know," he said. "I suspected that from the start. But Clara, it doesn't matter why we began. What matters is that we are here together and we have a choice. Every day we choose each other." Clara felt her heart swell. She realized that what had begun as a rebellion was turning into something real, something powerful. She was no longer just defying her mother. She was building a life she could be proud of. The engagement party was another story entirely. Clara's mother, desperate to maintain some control, had invited the entire social circle to witness the union she thought would be scandalous but temporary. She had assumed Clara would change her mind, that Edward or another wealthy suitor would tempt her away. But Clara arrived at the party with Daniel, radiant and confident, and the room fell silent. Gasps filled the air as people saw Daniel in the refined setting of the grand hall. His clothes were simple, but his posture, his calm demeanor, and the kindness in his eyes made a stronger impression than any designer outfit or flashy jewelry. Clara's mother's face tightened with frustration as she realized her daughter's choice was firm. Over the course of the evening, whispers spread. "Who is he? Where does he come from? Can someone like that really marry into a family like ours?" Clara ignored them all. She only had eyes for Daniel. And as they danced under the soft glow of chandeliers, she felt a sense of liberation she had never known. Yet, even in these moments of triumph, Clara couldn't shake a small curiosity. Daniel was humble, almost too humble, for someone who had captured the attention and admiration of so many. There was something about him that hinted at a deeper story, something he had not yet shared. Clara's instincts told her that appearances could be deceiving, and she had learned from experience that people often held secrets behind calm exteriors. In the weeks following the engagement, Clara found herself spending more time with Daniel in quiet, unassuming places, the fairgrounds where they first met, the stables at the edge of town, and even long walks through empty streets at night. They laughed, shared dreams, and spoke honestly about their fears and hopes. Daniel spoke of his past, of hard work, of learning to rely on himself and never expecting handouts. He had a quiet sense of dignity that Clara found inspiring. She realized that his true value was not in money or social standing, but in character, intelligence, and integrity. Clara also began to notice small hints that Daniel might not be as poor as he seemed. There were subtle details: a well-worn but expensive watch, stories of relatives who had once owned land in the city, and his uncanny knowledge of business and property matters. She didn't confront him about it, though. She wanted to understand the truth on her own, without suspicion or expectation. For now, she focused on the bond between them and the life they were beginning to build together. One day, as they sat on a hill overlooking the city, Clara shared her thoughts. "Daniel, I don't care what people think of us. I don't care if society gossips endlessly. I chose you because I respect you, because I trust you, and because I want to build a life with you. That's all that matters." Daniel took her hand and smiled. "I feel the same way, Clara. No matter what people say, no matter what obstacles we face, we have each other, and that is enough." Clara felt a wave of relief and joy wash over her. For the first time in her life, she felt that she was truly living for herself, not for her mother, not for society, not for appearances. She had taken control of her own story, and the path ahead was full of promise. Even as the engagement continued to shock and scandalize her social circle, Clara felt a quiet triumph. She was building a partnership based on respect, trust, and love, not wealth, power, or obligation. And she knew that, in time, the world would see Daniel for the man he truly was: strong, wise, and deserving of admiration. As part 2 came to a close, Clara stood on the threshold of a new life. The marriage was not yet complete, but the bond between her and Daniel had already transformed her world. She had defied her mother, challenged society, and discovered a connection deeper than she had ever imagined. And somewhere deep down, she sensed that Daniel held more surprises than she could guess, secrets that might change everything in ways she had never expected. Clara had always trusted her instincts, but even she had been surprised by the calm confidence Daniel carried. Despite the gossip, the whispers, and the judgmental glances of society, he never wavered. Yet as the weeks passed, Clara began to notice subtle signs that Daniel's life was far more complex than she had realized. Small details, almost too small to notice at first, kept appearing. A book on real estate tucked into his satchel, a rare coin glinting in his pocket, or a story about a distant relative owning land in the city. Each tiny clue made her curiosity grow, and she could not help but wonder, who was Daniel really? One rainy afternoon, as they walked along the quiet streets near the edge of town, Clara finally decided to confront him. They had just left the local cafe, their coats damp from the drizzle, and the rhythmic sound of rain on the cobblestones filled the air. "Daniel," she began carefully, "there's something I need to ask you." He looked at her, eyebrows slightly raised. "What is it?" You aren't exactly as poor as everyone thinks, are you?" Clara's voice was gentle, not accusing, but curious. "I've noticed little things, hints, that make me think there's more to your story." Daniel paused, considering her words. Then he smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and amusement. "You've noticed, haven't you?" he said. "Yes, you're right, I am not as poor as people believe, but I wanted you to know me first, not the money, not the land, not the name. I wanted you to see the real me before anything else." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "The real you," she repeated softly. "I thought I knew you, Daniel, but half of the city," her voice rose slightly in surprise. "How could anyone hide that? How could someone seem like a simple cowboy when you actually own so much?" Daniel shrugged, his calm demeanor unchanged. "I didn't hide it to deceive anyone. I hid it because wealth changes how people see you. I wanted to be judged for who I am, not for what I own. And when I met you, I realized you would never care about money. That's why I stayed quiet." Clara felt a mixture of shock, awe, and admiration. All this time, she had thought she was making a bold move to rebel against her mother, to challenge society, and to take control of her own life. Yet in reality, she had been stepping into a world far more extraordinary than she had imagined. The beggar cowboy she had planned to marry as an act of defiance was, in fact, a man of incredible influence and power. Over the next few days, Clara found herself seeing Daniel in a new light. She marveled not at his wealth, but at his humility, his intelligence, and the careful thought he put into every decision. Unlike many in her social circle, he never flaunted his possessions, never used his influence to belittle others, and never demanded attention. He had built a life of quiet control and respect, and now Clara realized he was inviting her to share it with him not as a pawn, but as a partner. The revelation also brought a new tension with her mother, Mrs. Hargrove had already been shocked by the engagement, and now the truth about Daniel's wealth and power hit her like a thunderbolt. When Clara calmly explained the situation, her mother's face went pale, and she clutched the back of a chair as though it could anchor her to reality. You mean he owns half the city?" Mrs. Hargrove whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes, mother," Clara said evenly. "And I love him for who he is, not for what he owns. He is honest, intelligent, and kind. And I will marry him because he respects me and supports me, not because of his money." Mrs. Hargrove sank into a chair, silent for a long moment. She had always believed that wealth, power, and status were the keys to success, the tools to shape her daughter's life. But now she saw that her daughter had chosen something different, something greater. Clara's mother felt a pang of loss, pride, and bewilderment all at once. Her carefully constructed plans had not only failed, but they had been completely overturned. Word of the revelation spread quickly through the city. The same people who had whispered about Clara's reckless engagement were now stunned. Those who had mocked Daniel for his appearance were suddenly awed by his influence. Clara, for her part, paid little attention to the gossip. She had long ago decided that her life was hers to live, and now she had the added satisfaction of knowing that the choice she had made was not only brave, but wise. Despite the excitement and attention, Clara and Daniel continued to focus on each other. Their days were filled with long conversations, quiet walks, and shared moments of laughter. Daniel introduced Clara to his world, not just the properties he owned, but the careful management, the decisions that shaped communities, and the responsibility he carried. Clara was amazed at the thoughtfulness and care he demonstrated, even in matters most people would overlook. One afternoon, they visited one of the largest estates Daniel owned. It was a sprawling property with orchards, gardens, and stables. As they walked through the fields, Clara marveled at the way Daniel moved through his world, with confidence, humility, and a sense of responsibility. "I never imagined this," she said softly. "All this time I thought I was rebelling against wealth, against power. And now I see that you've always carried it with care, without arrogance." Daniel smiled and took her hand. "Power is not about showing off. It's about responsibility, about using what you have to create a better life for yourself and for others. That's what I've tried to do. And now I want to share it with you, not to control you, but to walk alongside you as a partner." Clara felt a surge of love and respect. Her plan to shock her mother had led her to something far more meaningful than she had imagined. She realized that Daniel's strength was not in wealth alone, but in character, intelligence, and integrity. He had taught her a lesson she would never forget. True power is quiet, thoughtful, and generous, not flashy or demanding. As the engagement drew closer to the wedding, Clara noticed a change in her mother as well. Mrs. Hargrove, though still struggling with the loss of control, began to observe Daniel more carefully. She saw his humility, his kindness, and the way he treated her daughter with respect. Slowly, begrudgingly, she began to understand why Clara had chosen him. Clara, meanwhile, was learning more about herself. She had always believed that independence meant defiance, that freedom meant rebelling against expectations. But now she realized that true independence also meant choosing wisely, seeing beyond appearances, and embracing responsibility and respect in others. Her choice to marry Daniel was not just an act of rebellion. It was an act of insight, courage, and love. The days before the wedding were filled with preparations, but Clara focused more on understanding Daniel's world than on social formalities. She visited some of the properties he managed, met people whose lives he had impacted, and saw firsthand how carefully he balanced influence with care. Each experience deepened her respect and admiration for him. On a quiet evening, as they sat on the veranda of one of the estates overlooking the city lights, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had entered this plan as a rebellion, a way to assert independence and defy her mother's plans. And yet, in the process, she had discovered a man of extraordinary character, a love deeper than she had imagined, and a world far more interesting and complex than she had ever known. "Daniel," she said softly, resting her head against his shoulder, "I never imagined that rebelling would lead me to something so perfect. Not perfect in the way people think, not wealth or status, but perfect in truth, honesty, and partnership." Daniel kissed her forehead gently. "Sometimes, the choices we make to prove something to the world end up teaching us the most about ourselves. I'm glad your rebellion led you here, to me, to us." As part 3 closed, Clara realized that the story was no longer about shocking society or defying her mother. It was about love, respect, partnership, and the surprises life could hold. The man she had married as a beggar cowboy was far more than he seemed, and the life ahead promised not only romance but growth, adventure, and unexpected possibilities. Clara had learned a profound lesson. Appearances could deceive, but truth, integrity, and courage always revealed themselves in the end. And somewhere deep inside, she wondered what other surprises Daniel's world might hold. For now, though, she was content to walk beside him, ready for whatever came next, confident that the future, no matter how surprising, was theirs to shape together. The day of the wedding arrived with the sun shining brightly, as if the world itself celebrated Clara's choice. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers across the estate. Clara woke early, her heart fluttering with excitement and nerves. She had spent weeks preparing, not for appearances, but for a day that would mark the beginning of a life she had chosen for herself. She looked at herself in the mirror, dressed in a simple but elegant gown that Daniel had helped choose. It wasn't extravagant, but it reflected her personality perfectly, graceful, confident, and true to herself. She ran her fingers along the fabric and took a deep breath. Today was more than a wedding. It was the moment she had claimed her independence, defied expectations, and stepped into a future of her own making. Daniel arrived shortly afterward, dressed in his usual understated way, his cowboy hat replaced by a simple formal jacket. His presence brought Clara a sense of calm. He smiled at her as she walked toward him, and in that smile she felt all the tension of the past months dissolve. They had faced whispers, judgment, and uncertainty together, and now they were ready to face the world as a team. The ceremony was held in the beautiful garden on the estate, with sunlight filtering through the tall trees and casting golden patterns on the ground. Friends, neighbors, and a few members of the social circle had gathered, curious to witness the union that had caused so much gossip and speculation. There were whispers and sideways glances at Daniel, but Clara held her head high. She had chosen love, respect, and honesty over appearances, and nothing could shake her confidence. Mrs. Hargrove, Clara's mother, stood quietly at the front of the garden. She had spent the past weeks coming to terms with her daughter's choice, and though she still felt a sting of lost control, she could not deny that Daniel had proven himself worthy. Watching her daughter walk toward him, radiant and confident, Mrs. Hargrove felt a mixture of pride, relief, and awe. She realized that Clara had not only made a bold choice but a wise one, and she silently resolved to support her daughter, even if it challenged her own expectations. The vows were simple but heartfelt. Clara spoke of her love and respect for Daniel, of the trust they had built, and of the life they would create together. Daniel's words reflected his humility, his strength, and his admiration for Clara's courage and intelligence. As they exchanged rings, the crowd watched in quiet awe. This was not just a marriage of wealth or status. It was a union of equals, built on understanding, partnership, and shared values. After the ceremony, Clara and Daniel walked hand in hand through the estate, greeting guests and sharing smiles. The reception was filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of delicious food. Guests who had once whispered about the scandal now marveled at the genuine connection between the couple. People began to see what Clara had known all along. Daniel's true value was not in appearances or possessions, but in his character, intelligence, and the care he showed for those around him. Clara's mother approached her quietly during the reception. "You've made me realize something, Clara," Mrs. Hargrove said softly. I thought I was guiding your life for your own good, but I see now that you have wisdom beyond your years. You have chosen someone remarkable, and I cannot help but respect that." Clara smiled, feeling a wave of love for her mother despite the months of tension. "Thank you, Mother. I know it hasn't been easy, but I wanted to live my life my way, and I am grateful you can see that." Over the next few weeks, Clara settled into her new life with Daniel. They spent their days managing his properties, visiting the communities he supported, and learning from one another. Clara discovered that Daniel's influence extended beyond wealth. He was a man who used his resources to help others, improve neighborhoods, and create opportunities. She admired the thoughtfulness and care he put into every decision, from the smallest repairs on a property to the biggest investments in the city. Despite his wealth and influence, Daniel remained humble. He never flaunted his possessions, never boasted about his achievements, and never expected special treatment. Clara realized that this was what made him truly extraordinary. He had power, yes, but he used it responsibly, without arrogance or pride. And he had chosen her not for her status or wealth, but because he respected her, valued her opinion, and loved her for who she was. Their partnership grew stronger every day. Clara found herself learning not just about business and property, but about life, patience, and the quiet strength that comes from true respect. She discovered that independence did not mean doing everything alone. It meant choosing who to share her life with and learning to trust and rely on one another. Meanwhile, the city began to notice the impact of their partnership. Daniel's careful management of his properties and investments improved communities, created jobs, and inspired others to act responsibly with their own influence. Clara supported him in these efforts, offering her perspective, insight, and energy. Together, they became a team respected not just for wealth, but for integrity, vision, and the ability to make a positive difference. Mrs. Hargrove, though initially hesitant, gradually embraced the new dynamic. She saw how her daughter had grown, how Clara had learned to make wise decisions, and how Daniel had proven himself to be a man of character. She began to admire their partnership, recognizing that her daughter had not only found love, but also a mentor, guide, and true equal in Daniel. The mother-daughter relationship, once strained by control and expectation, blossomed into mutual respect and understanding. One evening, Clara and Daniel sat on the veranda overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. They watched as lights twinkled across the buildings, reflecting the life and energy of the city Daniel had quietly helped shape. Clara rested her head against Daniel's shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. "Do you ever think about how it all began?" Clara asked softly. "With the fair, the plan, and the idea to shock everyone?" Daniel smiled. "I do. And I am glad it happened the way it did. You were brave enough to make your choice, and that courage brought us together. It led to something far greater than either of us imagined." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude. "I never expected to find you, to find this life. I thought rebellion would be the point, but now I see that it was just the beginning. The real journey was discovering love, respect, and partnership." Daniel kissed her forehead gently. "And the journey is only starting. Together we can face anything, build anything, and create a life full of meaning. We don't need the approval of others. We have each other, and that is enough." As the months passed, Clara and Daniel continued to grow as a couple. They faced challenges, of course, unexpected problems with properties, difficult decisions, and occasional whispers from society, but they faced them together. Clara learned the power of patience, strategic thinking, and empathy. Daniel valued her perspective, her intelligence, and her courage. Together, they became stronger than they had been alone. Clara also realized that her rebellion had taught her a deeper lesson. Independence and courage were important, but so was discernment. Choosing the right partner, someone who respected her and shared her values, had been the true act of bravery. Her plan to defy her mother had led to love and partnership she could never have imagined, proving that life often surprises us when we dare to make bold choices. One day, as they walked through one of Daniel's largest estates, Clara paused to look at the horizon. "I never thought a plan to shock my mother would lead to this," she said, smiling. "But I am grateful. I have learned so much, not just about Daniel, but about myself." Daniel took her hand. "And I have learned from you too, Clara. You are strong, wise, and brave. Together we can accomplish anything, and we will continue to learn and grow." This life is ours to shape, and I am glad it is with you by my side." Clara felt a deep sense of contentment. She had not only found love and partnership, but she had also discovered her own strength, independence, and the ability to make wise, courageous choices. Her mother had finally understood and respected her decision. Society had witnessed the depth of Daniel's character, and Clara had stepped into a life that reflected her values and dreams. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of purple and gold, Clara knew that this was only the beginning. Her life with Daniel promised adventure, growth, love, and the fulfillment of dreams she had only dared to imagine. She felt ready to face whatever came next, confident in herself, in Daniel, and in the life they were building together. The world might still gossip, society might still judge, and challenges would inevitably arise, but Clara was no longer afraid. She had chosen her path, claimed her independence, and discovered the power of partnership, love, and integrity. And as she looked at Daniel, standing beside her with quiet confidence and unwavering support, she knew that together, they could overcome anything, shape their future, and create a life filled with meaning, joy, and unexpected surprises. For Clara, the journey that began as rebellion had become a story of courage, love, and self-discovery. And in the heart of the city, where the lights twinkled like stars, she knew that she had finally found her place, beside the man she loved, respected, and admired, ready to face the future together.